Pyramid scheme, a form of fraud that lures investors and pays profits to the earlier investors from money invested by newer investors. The evolution of money, with its origins from thousands of years ago with exchange of goods to paper money, having money backed by gold, to the origins of credit cards already from the 50s and 60s, to electronic money as well as cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin. The traditional dollar changed somewhat its format as the Nixon shock in the 70s under President Nixon. Each and every dollar wasn't backed by gold anymore. Now this has helped the global explosive growth and especially the United States. But this hasn't come without the price, as the money supply has increased substantially, so have the product and services prices increased as well. While the dollar has an endless supply, in comes Bitcoin as a potential solution with its maximum supply of 21 millions. So the question is Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies part of the future, or are they a mere pyramid scheme? So I have a master's degree in finance, and I also worked as a stock analyst. Normally when we look at assets such as publicly traded stocks, for instance Apple stock, it has an underlying cash flow that, for instance, derive from selling a lot of iPhones. When you have the stock's price divided by the cash flow, and more so what's the expectations of the future cash flow of the sold iPhones, we get a sense of if the stock is cheap or expensive. On the other hand, how should we value crypto, because it doesn't really have any underlying cash flow? So does that mean that cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin is basically a pyramid scheme? In other words, shouldn't crypto be worthless? Well, what if I told you that all currencies around the world basically are based on just the belief that you believe that they have some value? It's basically backed up by just the belief in the government. For instance, the dollar used to be backed by gold, but it was in the 1970s under the US President Richard Nixon that he unpegged the dollar's value from gold. This allowed them to quickly print a lot of dollars, becoming the strongest currency around the world. On average, these so-called fiat currency systems last 30 years. So by far, the dollar has been the best type of fiat currency system to date. However, in recent years, many concerns have arisen to the surface. So on the flip side, the enthusiasts of cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin talk about it becoming a supporting reserve currency to the dollar, or could it even replace it? Or is it a pure pyramid scheme? Well, yes and no, because the price of cryptos and Bitcoin go up and down based on the narrative that it could become something in the future. So what is that something? Well, the cryptocurrencies at the moment are somewhat in an identity crisis. Is it a store of value like gold? Could it be a global payment method, for instance like MasterCard? And some different tokens and chains have different functions, for instance like DeFi, otherwise known as decentralized finance, which would, according to the truest crypto enthusiasts, support or even replace the banking system. But also terms like Web3 come to the surface, where users own the web. In other words, when we think about the internet, nobody owns it, and some call it Web 2. And Web3 basically means the next step where the users would own it in a decentralized way. On the flip side, the critics are extremely skeptical about cryptocurrencies, calling it the new tulip bubble, referring to the tulip bubble in the 17th century in the Netherlands, where the price of the tulips quickly started to surge. The difference is that lasted only a few months, while for instance Bitcoin has been around for over a decade. But the road has of course been pretty rocky. Now the question is the bubble finally about to burst? As we've seen massive sell-offs this year, where for instance Bitcoin, since its peak last year, has today lost over $600 billion in its value. Well, it's not necessarily game over for crypto, because much of this was due to that the economy and the stock market were being inflated by something that you probably also heard about, where the government has been printing endless money. Therefore, there has been a lot of signs that the economy and the stock markets have been overheating. As you got a lot of money printed into the system, it's allowed for cryptocurrencies and even these called meme coins like Dogecoin and Shiba Inu to rally into madness. And then they finally crashed, which didn't then of course help cryptocurrencies being taken seriously in the mainstream. Now, due to the pandemic, a lot of central banks had to print a lot of money. especially the central bank in the United States. Then of course the conflicts around the world also came. So it's worth noting that it's not just due to these circumstances that the banks had to print a lot of money. Also somewhat this is an excuse because basically the system is also designed kind of in a way where money has to be printed in order to keep the show going. However, then we finally hit a wall where inflation quickly started to rise, basically causing the central banks to pull the handbrake, raising interest rate to calm down the inflation. However, the crash of crypto, you can't just blame it on the overheating economy and the stock markets. Because earlier this year, the whole crypto industry held its breath when Luna, one of its largest tokens, basically lost all of its value in a matter of days, destroying people's lives. This caused a cascade of events where investors and individuals lost all of their money, becoming bankrupt. There was so much invested money into crypto with the help of debt. Now on the flip side, some were taking huge profits from this crash. It's rumored that this masterful play was caused by the smart money on Wall Street. However, there's also rumor that this was too much for the board at Tesla, causing Elon Musk to be pressured to sell all of Tesla's Bitcoin holdings. This then finally caused the major decline in crypto. So back then to the question, should crypto be valued at a zero? Because you basically can't value it like a stock. It doesn't have an underlying product, for instance, like Apple has its iPhone. And you can value it based on future sales of the iPhone. Should crypto be valued at zero? Is the game over? Or is there still hope for crypto? And if so, how should we value the cryptocurrencies as well as Bitcoin? Well, in comes the network effect and the famous Metcalfe's law, which means that when you get growth to a certain threshold, it starts to grow like an S-curve. This happened to Facebook when it first grew its 10%. It took roughly 4 years. But once it reached a critical 100 billion users, it quickly grew its next 90%. This was due to the network effect. You simply couldn't miss out on what's the latest news in everyone's lives. Now the same comparison can be made to the internet in its early infant stages in the 90s. First it wasn't really recognized, it was considered a fad, but then in 97-98 the users on the internet quickly surged with over 130 million users. Now the cryptocurrencies basically dwarf these numbers last year as we got past 300 million users in crypto. Problem is, which year should we look at in cryptocurrencies? Because Bitcoin has been around over a decade and that doesn't make the numbers look as stellar. However, on the other hand, when we have Ethereum for instance, it has been around for less than a decade. And many proponents want to look at the year when Ethereum got around. But then again, we have the identity crisis of cryptocurrencies as we yet don't know which narrative we should focus on. Is it the store of value, the means of payment, or DeFi, decentralized finance, that is among other what Ethereum is. So while the future is uncertain for crypto, so it is also for the current traditional economy, where we unpegged the dollar's value from the gold. It's more a belief system in the government. But of course, the system is kind of designed in this way. So the question is, will the central banks get inflation under control? Is it time for the financial system to be renewed? Is there room for the innovation of crypto with its lower transaction cost and 24/7 possibility of doing a transaction? Finally, renewing what MasterCard did in the 60s? Or on the other hand, will the extreme volatility, the meme coin, the sustainability issues be crypto's downfall? These are interesting questions that will be answered in the near future. I hope you found this video insightful. If this finance video makes you stressed in your busy life, make sure to check the video at the end of this one on how to train on a tight time budget. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video.